Hashem. Today's Daf Yomi, Tanis Esther, 5786 is Menachos Daf Nun, Menachos 50. So we're going to start on Nun Amud Aleph on the fourth line, where we quote the line from our Mishnah. And our Mishnah said if they didn't bring the lamb in the morning, then they brought it in the afternoon. Rabbi Shimon said, oh, that's only if they did it, if it was an accident. But if it was b'mezidin, if it was intentional, then they didn't bring it in the afternoon. And then Rabbi Shimon said about the Ketores, it says if they didn't bring the Ketores in the morning, they brought it in the afternoon. And about that, Rabbi Shimon said, the Kula Haita Kreva Bein Arbaim. They brought everything in the afternoon. They only inaugurated the golden altar, Ela B'Ketoros Hasamim Shel Bein Arbaim. They only inaugurated the altar, the inner altar, the golden altar, the incense altar, with the incense of the afternoon. So the Gemara says, Chinuch man dechar shmei. Who's talking about inauguration here of the altar? We have nothing to do with that. Why is Rabbi Shimon bringing it in? So we have to say, Chisuri Mechzer. Our Mishnah is missing some words. V'hachi katani la. And v'hachi katani, this is how we have to read our Mishnah. Lo ikrivu keves baboker. If they didn't bring the lamb in the morning, lo yakrivu bein arbayim, then they should not bring it in the afternoon. Not that they should bring it, but they should not bring it. Meaning, say, if they didn't bring the morning one, then don't bring that morning one in the afternoon. When is that the case? When the altar was not yet inaugurated. But if the altar had already previously been inaugurated, they should bring it in the afternoon. And Amar Rabbi Shimon said, Masai, when is this the case? Bisman shayu anusin. If it was done by accident, shogugin, or if it was an accident, if they intentionally did not bring it, meaning to say they sinned when they didn't bring in the morning, then if they didn't bring in the morning, they cannot do it in the afternoon. But and that we'll see that was a decree. But if they didn't bring the incense in the morning, they should continue to bring the part of the incense in the afternoon and bring up the morning incense and do the whole thing in the afternoon. What's the source for this idea that if the altar was not yet inaugurated in the morning, then they shouldn't bring then they don't bring the afternoon offering? What's the source for this idea? The Tan Rabbanan it says in Parashas Tetzaveh, the second lamb you shall bring in the afternoon. Sheni ben arbayim, only if it's the second one do you bring in the afternoon. Below Rishon ben arbayim, but not if it's the first one. Medvar mamurim, when do we say this? When the altar is not yet inaugurated. But if the altar had previously been inaugurated, I feel Rishon ben arbayim, even the first one can be brought in the afternoon. And it says, Rabbi Shimon, Amar Rabbi Shimon, Amasai, when is that the case? Bisman shayu anusin, if Oshogin, when they didn't bring it as an accident. But if they intentionally didn't bring it or sinfully didn't bring it, if they didn't bring the lamb in the morning, then they shouldn't bring it in the afternoon. But if they didn't bring the incense in the morning, so then they should bring the incense, the full incense in the afternoon. The incense was typically split up, half in the morning, half in the afternoon. So if they didn't bring the incense in the morning, they bring it in the afternoon. So the Gemara says, well, if they didn't bring the lamb in the morning, they don't bring the lamb in the afternoon. But why is the altar being punished? Since the Kohanim were the ones who did the sin, Mizbeach Batal, why should the altar suffer? Why should the altar not have its offering brought? So Amarava Hachikamer, this is what it means. Those Kohanim who are sinful, they're the ones who don't bring the altar of the morning and the afternoon, the lamb of the morning and the afternoon. But other Kohanim should bring it. But if they didn't bring the incense in the morning, even though it was a sin, then the Kohanim can bring the incense in the afternoon, even though Kohanim who sinned. Why are we not making the same decree by the incense that we make by the lamb? So the Gemara explains the decree didn't apply to the incense because since the incense was not common, and Rashi gives two explanations. First explanation is that the lambs were there were many olos in the altar. but the incense was something that was rare. It was only brought twice a day. Additionally, Rashi quotes the Gemara in Yuma, which is based upon the pasuk of Hisim Ketorah B'Pecha, and then it says in the pasuk that there will be tremendous wealth for it. So the Ketorah, the Gemara in Yoma says that the person never did the incense twice. He only did the incense once in his life. So since it was so rare, it wasn't common that they would sin. The lo shlicha uma'atra, and first, in addition to that, the person who brought the incense, it was a segula for wealth. Rashi says, that Hashem will bless you with wealth. And so therefore, since the Ketores was a segula for wealth and was very rare, chavivale, it was considered to be very precious. Chavivalahu, it was very precious, and they wouldn't sin with it, and so therefore they didn't have to make a decree about the incense. When Nun Amadav towards the bottom, Boker Tov, Jeff, Amar Rabbi Shimon V'Kula Isa Kreva Bein Arbayim. The whole incense could be brought in the afternoon, even though it wasn't brought in the morning. If he sinned, it will be brought in the afternoon. So because the incense altar was originally, when it would be inaugurated in the afternoon. So therefore they could bring, even though they missed the morning one, they could bring it in the afternoon. The Gemara says, really? Tanya, Victoris Hasamim Shel Shachar, but we have a different source that says that the incense altar was inaugurated in the morning. So Gemara says, Tanahim, well, the dispute was the incense altar, which is also called the Mizbeach HaPnim, and also it's also called the Mizbeach HaZav, it's called the Mizbeach HaKtoris. It has three names. According to another opinion, it was inaugurated in the morning. So it's a Machukas Tanaim. Amar Abayim, Mistabra, Commander Amar, Biktoris Hasamim Shal Bein Arbayim. It's logical to assume, like the position that says that the incense altar was first inaugurated in the afternoon. How do we know this? Because it says, Baboker, Beitivo es haneros yaktirena. So in the morning, it says about the incense, in the morning, when they prepare the candles, yaktirena, that's when the incense should be brought. So ilavda adlakami urta, if they hadn't first lit the candles, because the atava, according to most Rishonim, means the preparation or the clearing out of the candles. So if it had not been for the fact that they had lit the candles the night before, hatava b'tzafar mehecha. So why would they be fixing the candles, cleaning out the menorah in the morning? And so therefore, clearly that's when they brought the incense also the night before. So that's why it was inaugurated in the afternoon. Well, and according to the one who says that the incense altar was first inaugurated in the morning, that position will compare not to the menorah, but to the altar of the Olah. Again, the outer altar also has three names: Mizbeach HaChutz, Mizbeach HaOlah, and Mizbeach HaNechoshes, or Mizbeach HaDama. So that these are the outer altar. So it's compared to the Mizbeach HaOlah. Just like that was inaugurated in the morning. So too, the golden altar, the inner altar, the Ketores altar was inaugurated in the morning, according to that position. The Loas HaShulchan, and the table was inaugurated only Ela B'Lechem HaPanim B'Shabbos, when the bread called the Lechem HaPanim, the bread that the Kohanim would eat every single week, was placed on the table on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Ela B'Chol Ilchnuche Hudu HaMachanech. So the implication is that the table was inaugurated on Shabbos. I mean to say, during the week, it was inaugurated. During the week, it could not be inaugurated. HaKadushe Mikdish, but if you place the bread on it, the bread would be sanctified, meaning to say that it would have Kedusha Saguf. No, that can't be. We know it's not the case. So the Gemara says, no, he Gufa Kamaswan. That's actually what our Mishnah is teaching us. It's teaching us the Chinuch V'Kiddush to Shochan B'Shabbos Hill. That the inauguration of the table and the sanctification of the bread happened only when it was placed on the table on Shabbos. Remember, the bread would be placed on Shabbos and the old bread would be removed on Shabbos. Kedikatani Seifa, like it says in the next clause in the Mishnah, menorah el b'shiva neiroseh bein arbayim. And the menorah will be inaugurated only when the 7 candles in the afternoon were lit. So too, and since that's a sanctification, so too this is the same law applies by the table. When it was used, the bread was sanctified, and that would also have been the first time that the table was inaugurated. So then we said, Tan Rabbanon, Zel Ketores, She'olta L'Yachid Al Mizbeach HaChitzon. So there's a brisa, and we're starting the brisa in the middle of things, in medias res, like we often do in the Gemara. So this was the Ketores. There was a one-time Ketores that was brought by an individual, and it was brought on the outer altar. So there's two things unusual here. Normally, typically, the Ketores, every other time the Ketores was brought on the inner altar. There was one time where it was brought on the outer altar. Every other time the Ketores would be brought by the community, a communal offering. But there was one time when it was an individual offering. So let's go. That one time in history was a hora'ah sha'ah. It was an unusual moment. It was a special moment. Heicha, when did it happen? Amar Rav Papa b'Nisiyim. During the inauguration of the Mishkan, that happened with the Nisiim, Parashas Naso. So that they each brought an individual ketores, and it was brought on the outer altar. So so the Gemara says, okay, so the implication of this statement is the only time it happened as an individual and on the outer altar was with the Nisiim. Oh, so maybe an individual could bring it also on the inner altar, or the community could also bring it on the outer altar. Is that the implication that those two things together only happened once in history? So that's what the Gemara is going to challenge. So it can't be an individual on the outer altar, but an individual could bring it on the inner altar. And the second implication, also on the outer altar, an individual can't bring it, but a community could bring it on the outer altar. You mean to say those two implications? It can't be. Nidava. I might think an individual can also bring in incense offering on the inner altar. The Korani ba motzas vasecha tishmor vasis, and I might think that this is a valid vow. Tamalomer lo talu alav ketorah zara. No, you can't bring any other incense on the inner altar. I might think an individual can bring on the inner altar, but because he never brings, there's no ever case where the individual has an obligation to bring an incense on top of 50B of tzibur, yay, maybe, but the community could bring it. I might think the community could bring it. Because sometimes the community does have to bring every day an incense offering. No, we say that they cannot bring it that's a commandment to the community. It's in the plural. I might think the community cannot bring it on the inner altar. And I might think, but a community can bring a voluntary offering on the outer altar. No, they can't do it. So therefore, we have the question: why is the implication of this brisa that the community could bring it on the outer altar, or the individual could bring it on the inner altar? So Amar Rav Papa lomi bai kamer. No, that our Mishnah is not. Our Mishnah is lomi bai, meaning say that's the formulation. Lomi bai tzibur al mizbeach hachitzon. Not only can a community not bring incense on the outer altar, because we never have such a case. And not only can an individual not bring it on the inner altar, because we never have such a case. Even an individual on the outer altar, because we have such a case where the Nisiim brought individual incense offerings on the outer altar during the inauguration of the Mishkan. So that was a one-off moment in history. Now we have the Chavite Kohen Gadol. Now our next Mishnah talks about the Chavitin. Chavitin means like fried in the pan of the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol had to bring an offering every day. He would bring in a isaron of flour, a stiras ha'efa, a tenth of an ephah of flour, every single day, half in the morning and half in the afternoon. Now, actually there's somebody who's a tremendous Torah scholar, and he's a way bigger Torah scholar than me, and I was listening to his shir this morning. And I listened to his share for today's daf and tomorrow's daf. He usually helps me so much. And I was surprised that he didn't know the answer to this question, because one of the people asked him, Where does this money come from? That the Kohen Gadol has to bring a carbon every day, and he said he didn't know, but it's clear from other sources that the money comes from the Kohen Gadol himself, and that's why the Gemara tells us in Yuma that the Kohen Gadol had to be the wealthiest. Everyone there, he had to be very wealthy. How else is he going to afford to bring this carbon every single day? He had to make this offering. So the Kohen Gadol had to bring half in the morning and half in the afternoon. Chavite Kohen Gadol, the Minchas Chavitin of the Kohen Gadol, lo ayu buying chatzayin. It's not that he brought half of the flour in the morning and then in the afternoon he took another half of the flour from his home. Ela maybe isaron shalem. He would bring a complete amount, the isaron, v'chotzeo. He would bring it from his house and then divide it up in the temple. Makriv mechza b'boker mechza ben arbayim. And he would bring half in the morning and half in the afternoon. Kohen Shehev, one of the reasons why they say the Kohen has to bring it is it's like that Minchas Chinuch, that the first time a Kohen serves in the temple, he has to bring an inaugural offering. So the Kohen, although every day is supposed to be fresh to him, like it's his first day. So then it says, Kohen Shehevi Mechta Shachar. So let's say the Kohen brings half of the Yisaron in the morning. He brought his half Yisaron in the morning. Umeis, and then he died. Uminu Kohen Achar Tachtav. They immediately put a new Kohen in. Lo yavi Chatz Yisaron Mibei. So the Kohen can't say, the next Kohen can't say, well, listen, I could combine, I'll bring it, because we still have a half left over from the morning offering, that only half was brought. So the new Kohen Gadol can say, I'll just bring another half, the Chatz Yisrael Shal Rishon, and I'll combine it with the first half that's left over, and I'll have a full Isaron. No, you can't do that. Maybe Isaron Shalom. He has to bring a complete Isaron, the Chotzeo, and divide it. Makriv Mechza, and then he only brings half of it because it's in the afternoon. Umechza Avad, and then half of it will be lost. Nimtu Shnei Chatzon Crave and Mishnei Chatzon Ovdin. So in that scenario where the Kohen Gadol dies after his morning Minchas Chavitin, half of two halves will be lost and two halves will be brought. Tan Rabbanan, so says the Brayso, Ilu Nemer Mincha Machatzis. If the pasuk had said Mincha Machatzis instead of Machatzisa Baboker Machatzisa Be'erev. If the pasuk had said Mincha Machatzis Hayis Yomer, maybe Chatzisa Romi Beso Shachar Sumakriv Chatzisa Romi Beso Arvis Sumakriv. I would have said they'll bring a half of Isaron in the morning and then a half in the night and bring it. So from the unusual formulation of half in the morning and half at night, it means Mechza Mishal Mumakriv. If he brings half from a complete amount. HaKetzad, how is this the case? Maybe Isaron Shoem, he brings a complete Isaron, Vichotzeo, and then he divides it Umakriv. Mechza Baboker, Mechza Ben Arbayim. And that's when he brings half in the morning and half at night. Nitma Mechza Shal Ben Arbayim. Let's say after he brought the half in the morning, the half in the afternoon became Tameh, O Sha'avad, or maybe he lost it. You imagine you're losing there's a lot going on in the base of Mikdash, and he lost it. I might think, okay, just replace it with another half. That won't work. There's half in the morning and half at night. He has to bring half from a whole. Okay, so in this scenario, just like we said in our Mishnah, maybe Isaron Shalami Base. So he has to bring a new full Isaron, divide it, and he'll bring half, and half will get lost. So in this scenario, just like in the scenario of our Mishnah, Nimtzu Shnei Chatzayin Craven, two halves are brought, Shnei Chatzayin Ovdim, and two halves are lost. Another scenario, Kohen Gadol Sheikriv Mechta Shachar Sumeis, and this is the scenario of our Mishnah. Kohen Gadol brought half in the morning and he died. Uminu Achar Tachtav, they appointed a new person. Yachol Yavi Chatzi Yisrael Mi Beiso, Chatzi Yisrael Shal Rishon. I might think that the new Kohen Gadol just needs to bring a half, or he could take the half of the first person. He has to bring a half from a whole. Okay, so maybe he brings a full Yisrael and divides it. And he brings half and half is lost. Nimtzu, so under that scenario, we're going to say, Shnei Chatzayin Ovdim Shnei Chatzayin Kremen. Exactly like our Mishnah said, two halves of the Chavitin are lost and two halves are brought. Tana Kamei Rav Nachman. So then we had a Tana. So then we had a Brisa that was taught in front of Rav Nachman. Mechta Rishon and Mechta Sheni. What do we do with these two halves that are supposed to be lost? To Ubar Tzurasan Hiyatul Beis Hasrifa. So the Tana that was taught the Bryce in front of Rav Nachman that the two halves we have to wait for them to become disqualified and then we burn them. We wait for them to go till past the period of expiration date and then we burn them. Amoy Rav Nachman Bishlam Rishon. I understand why the first one gets this. This actually is relating to a dispute in Pesachim, as you'll see from the Gemara. It'll become clear. It's a dispute elsewhere. I understand why the first one is supposed to, why you have to wait for it to become disqualified before burning, because it had been at one point worthy to be brought. And so the law is if something was worthy to be brought and then it becomes disqualified, you have to wait for, and then you can't bring it, you have to wait for it to become disqualified. Fine, I understand. Because the first one had been worthy to be brought. Elasheni, but the second one, Lamalei, Ibor Tzura. Why do you have to wait for it to be to nightfall before burning it? Why do we have to wait for it to be disqualified? The second one was never worthy to be brought. It was only worthy to be brought half of it, not the whole thing. So Gemara says the Amro Chamani. Well, no. This opinion of our Mishnah that said you have to wait, or this opinion of the Brisa that said you have to wait for it to be brought to Uber Tzuras and then you have to wait for it to be disqualified. That must be like the position of Rabbi Baravua. That must be like the position of Rabbi Baravua. He says, Afilu Pigul Tan Ibor Tzura, that even if it has an inherent disqualification, you still can't bring it right away. You still have to wait for it to be disqualified by night. Rav Ashi Amar Afilu Tema Rabbanan. It can even go by the position of the Rabbanan who say that if it has an inherent disqualification, you can burn it right away. Even to be inno de palgi bahu, because since at the moment where you divided the half that the new Kohen Gadol was bringing that night, he could have brought either one. So michsu chazu, so it was capable of being brought. So it was not an inherent disqualification, and therefore you have to wait till nightfall. Itmar chavite Kohen Gadol ketzad otzinosan. How did they bring the chavitin? How was this carbon of the Kohen Gadol? How did they make it? How did they cook it? Rav Kliya bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan Ofa. That first they baked it, ve'achar kach metagna, and then they fried it. There is a discussion. What's the definition of? What's the distinction between frying and baking? Because really, all bake. You could bake something in an oven with oil, and you could fry, and you could put something on the stove, and it could technically be a kind of baking. So that's a different discussion, which is related to many other topics. But for now, we'll just take it at face value that it says Rabbi Yochanan, or really we have a different version of this, that it's Rabbi Chanina, that you bake it and then you fry it. That's how you make the minchas chavit. And Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Chanina, mitagna v'achak ochva. That first you fry it and then you bake it. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, kavasa didid Mistabra. He says it's logical to say, like me, that first bake it and then fry it, because it says in the pasuk about the minchas chavitin, tufeni minchas pitim. And the word tufeni is unusual. You bake it for me. Ta'afena no'eh. You bake it properly. It means to say that first you bake it while it's no'eh, while it's still nice, before it's fried up and looking like a dark piece of schnitzel. And then you fry it. No, it's logical to say first you fry it and then bake it. Tufeni, tafeni, no. When you bake it, it's already partially cooked. It's fried up first. Kitanai. So the Gemara says, well, maybe this is actually machukas tanaim. Tufeni, na. That the first position of the Brisa says that you bake it. When you bake it, it's already raw. It's already partially cooked. And Rabbi Omer tofeni na. When you bake it, it's nice. Meaning to say, it's not cooked at all. Rabbi Yossi Omer ta'ofeni ta'ofeni. So Rabbi Yossi says ta'ofeni rabbi, meaning to say you bake it multiple times. Meaning to say you bake it, then you fry it, then you bake it again. Why does Rabbi Yossi say that? Rabbi Yossi says that because islay na v'islay na. He reads it like both ways, so he passes like both opinions. Tanan Hasam. Chavite Kohen Gadol, the chavitim of the Kohen Gadol, rishasan, varichasan, vafiyasan bifnim. The kneading, the preparing of the bread, and the baking all happened inside the base of inside the Zara, inside the courtyard. V'dochos as a Shabbos, and overrides the Shabbos. Minane Mili, what's the source? Amar Rafuna Tufeni. Tofeni na. You have to bake it in a nice manner. The afilemi esmo. If you're going to bake the bread the day before in shefoa, it's going to be no good. It'll get it'll uh it'll get moldy or something. It won't be good. So okay, let's stop here. We'll pick this up. God one will do it at 8 o'clock this morning. I'd like to do the daf again at 5:15 tonight before mincha, and then also tomorrow morning at 6:30 and after davening. We'll stop here. Baruch Hashem.